My hands were shaking so badly it was a miracle I'd even gotten the damn key into the lock. Every instinct screamed at me to keep my hands pressed against the unforgiving metal of this alien cell, to feel the cool reassurance that they couldn't get to me in here. But my brain, the logical part of me that wasn't currently short-circuiting, knew better. They were going to find out. It wouldn't be hours, maybe not even minutes, before someone figured out I'd pulled one over on them. This whole place ran with the kind of precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. They'd be onto me the second I missed my scheduled meal, or the shift change and a new set of beady eyes came looking for their favorite test subject. Test subject. That's all I'd been to them. Probed, measured, analyzed. My every breath scrutinized by those clicking, chittering freaks with their ink-black eyes and translucent skin. We might have both been vaguely humanoid, walk on two legs, have opposable thumbs, but that's about where the similarities stopped. They were all spindly limbs and bulbous heads that pulsed with what I could only assume was some sort of bioluminescent brain activity. Maybe they were trying to learn. Understand. What makes a human different, what gives us that fire? I like to think that, at least, that my suffering had been for some noble purpose and not just sadistic curiosity on their part. No, that was a lie. I knew damn well it was the latter. I had the scars to prove it. Sweat dripped into my eyes, a mix of exertion and sheer heart-pounding panic. It took 2 more tries before the ancient mechanism finally wheezed open. The cell door creaked with an ear-splitting shriek, but it was sweet music compared to the alarms that should have started blaring any second. Someone was slacking. Or I was that damn good. I didn't stop to contemplate my sudden and inexplicable luck, instead scrambling into the narrow, dimly lit corridor beyond. The last time I'd walked those halls they'd had me shackled, restraints tight enough to cut off all circulation. There was a sort of vindictive satisfaction in moving under my own power now, in knowing that my legs were my own again, no matter how fleeting this freedom was going to be. My plan, and I use the term loosely, involved getting my hands on a weapon and commandeering some sort of ship. How I was going to go about the whole flying a spaceship of unknown alien origin part was a problem for future me to worry about. Right now, survival was the priority. The guards. Well, they weren't exactly what I would have expected. No burly armored figures here. Instead, their security seemed to boil down to 2 things, the clinically sterile environment and what I could only describe as floating jellyfish drones. The drones buzzed along the hallways like oversized, luminescent insects, their single red sensor sweeping across the walls. Stealth wasn't my strong suit, and I knew the moment one of those things spotted me, it was game over. But they were also mind-numbingly predictable. Patrol patterns as rigid as their metal-plated walls. It took the better part of an hour of heart in my throat dodging and hiding, before I found what I was looking for. An empty sidearm holster. Either this facility was shockingly undermanned, or they were insanely overconfident. I preferred to believe the latter. It made me feel less like I was trapped in a ridiculously elaborate mouse maze. Every inch of my training screamed that this was a terrible idea, that snatching a weapon would be the equivalent of ringing the dinner bell. But staying unarmed was a one-way ticket back to the lab, and I'd rather go down fighting. Crouching in a shadowed ventilation shaft, I wrestled the weapon free. My hands remembered its shape, its weight. A sense of familiarity washed over me, cutting through the constant buzzing anxiety. It may have been an alien design, with weird curves and a glowing power core, but at its heart, it was still a gun. And with a gun came options. I knew this place. Not all of it, but the sections I'd been dragged through over the past months. Each prod, each invasive scan, each grueling physical test had burned its layout into my brain. This wasn't some sprawling metropolis. It was, as far as I could tell, a single, self-contained ship. Their prison, yes, but also their home. If I could find my way to the hangar. It was a long shot. A gamble built on the assumption these spindly freaks were as arrogant as they looked, and that they never expected one of their lab rats to break free. I had no delusions that they wouldn't come after me. The second they realized what had happened, every available alien and likely a good chunk of their tech would be mobilized to hunt me down. A tremor ran through my hand as I slid the weapon back into its holster. The cool metal felt almost reassuring against my skin. It was time to move. I was still technically their prisoner, an escapee with nowhere to go but deeper into the belly of the beast. But somehow, that knowledge made me less afraid. Because before, I'd been a specimen. Just a thing to be poked and prodded, dissected down to my DNA. Now I was prey. And humans, we don't go down without a fight. The corridors twisted and turned, a labyrinth of harsh, artificial light and strange, pulsating control panels. The aliens, thankfully few and far between, seemed almost oblivious. Maybe the fact that their lab rat had up and sprouted legs was so far beyond their comprehension that it hadn't even registered as a possibility. Or, more likely, I was moving through low-security areas, the places they couldn't conceive of a prisoner daring to venture into. I crept closer to what memory told me was the central hub, the pulsing heart of the ship. If my hunch was right, and I was preying on every god I knew and a few I didn't, the hangar bay would be on the opposite side. Luck, that fickle mistress I hadn't had much dealing with these last months, finally seemed to throw me a bone. Instead of more clicking, chittering guards, the central hub buzzed with activity. Not the armed, panicked kind, though. It seemed the daily grind on an alien spaceship involved about as much paperwork and mindless data entry as it did back on Earth. A small cluster of aliens hunched over glowing consoles, mandibles working in agitation as tendril-like fingers flew across screens. An open doorway beckoned, a sliver of blessed darkness amidst the blinding lights. It looked too easy, a trap tailor-made for a desperate fugitive, but desperation was all I had left. My boots scuffed softly against the smooth floor as I slipped inside. The room was long and narrow, lined with flickering consoles and sealed hatches that had to lead to other parts of the ship. A cramped control room, a place to monitor activity in this sector. No weapons, no guards, and, most importantly, no way for them to see I was here, not unless they turned around. My heart decided it would be an excellent time to try and leap out of my chest. There were 3 of them. Enough firepower in those spindly frames to melt me down to paste before I could blink, let alone make any kind of play for their consoles. Options cycled through my head, fight or flight kicking into overdrive. Maybe I could surprise them, take them out before. My gaze caught on the main viewing screen, a panoramic display of the space outside the ship. I sucked in a sharp breath, everything else fading into the background. That wasn't space. At least, not any kind of space I'd ever seen. No familiar constellations, no comforting sight of the Milky Way. Instead, it was a swirling, impossible nebula of pinks and purples, shot through with veins of silver light. We were nowhere near Earth. Nowhere near home. The realization hit like a physical blow. These bastards, they hadn't just locked me up, they'd shipped me. God only knows how far across the galaxy. This wasn't a prison, it was exile disguised as a research facility. White-hot fury flooded my veins. There'd be time for existential breakdowns later. Right now, that fury, that red-hot rage was fuel. And I was going to burn it down to the ground if it was the last thing I did. A reckless plan began to form in my head. My options were limited: take a gamble on the consoles, maybe find something to help me get to the hangar, or play it safe and slip away while their backs were turned. I was tired of playing it safe. The gun thrummed with barely restrained power in its holster. They wouldn't expect their docile lab rat to suddenly sprout fangs, and surprise was the best weapon I had right now. There was no time to overthink this. The longer I hesitated, the more likely one of them would turn around and spot me. I crept closer, trying to make my footsteps as silent as possible against the slick flooring. Each step felt like an eternity. I could hear the blood pounding like a war drum in my ears, could feel the frantic thumping of my pulse echoing in my throat. They were close, so close I could almost smell the strange, metallic tang that clung to their skin. My fingers tightened around the weapon. 5 feet. 4. 3. I lunged forward, gun leveled at the closest alien. The creature let out a startled screech, skinny limbs flailing in shocked reflex. The other 2 whipped around, those eerily smooth black eyes widening in alarm. Time seemed to stutter step. Don't move. My voice was barely above a whisper, raspy with disuse, but it sliced through the stillness of the room like a razor. I was bluffing, desperately hoping I could will bravado into being with sheer force of desperation. 2 of them, the ones with limbs that could have passed as arms, froze. The one I'd targeted first made a guttural, clicking sound and jerked toward one of the panels on the wall. It was small and flush, almost invisible, likely some kind of distress beacon. I fired. The beam of energy pulsed out of the gun, not the loud blast of a projectile weapon, but a concussive hum that made the air crackle. The alien jerked back, clutching a scorched forearm. Its screech pitched higher, a sound that crawled under my skin and made my teeth ache. I said, "Don't move." I motioned with the gun, forcing them to back away from the wall panels. "Now I need you to do something for me," I said, trying and failing to keep the tremor out of my voice. The aliens exchanged a series of clicking chirps, too fast for me to process, their bulbous heads swiveling toward each other in agitation. Were they communicating the best way to disarm me, or were they just as panicked and confused as I hoped they were? I'm not going to ask again. Turn around. Go to that console. I pointed toward the central hub of the viewing screen where they had been previously stationed. And access your ship's schematics. I want the route to your hangar bay. One of the creatures finally scuttled forward. Its movements were jerky, full of a coiled tension, as if it was sizing me up for a desperate attack. My finger twitched over the trigger. Do it. I barked. It whimpered or perhaps hissed and reached out one spindly appendage to tap at the console. Glyphs and symbols I couldn't decipher flickered to life across the screen. The alien manipulated them with surprising speed, the spacey nebula outside momentarily forgotten. A map linked into existence, a twisty network of corridors and nodes in clinical white against the dark background. I scanned it frantically, the gun never wavering. Hangar bay. Hangar bay. There. My heart stuttered as I traced a pulsating red line across the screen, likely the most heavily guarded route to my only hope of escape. Take a screenshot, I ordered, though I couldn't fathom how to make that gesture universal. Or record it in a way I can access later. More chirping. Frantic taps danced across the console, followed by a series of rhythmic beeps that made me want to claw my ears off. Can you transfer this data to a portable device of some kind? A data chip? Anything? I was babbling now, adrenaline-fueled desperation making me sloppy. The alien? My hostage? No, that was giving me far too much credit, hesitated. Then it reached inside a fold of its translucent tunic and pulled out a small, shimmering cube. Another chirp, and it inched toward me, cube held out in a trembling three-fingered grip. I lowered the weapon just enough to snatch it, never taking my eyes off the trio. This is giving me the directions? A series of rhythmic pulses of light, yes, maybe? I tucked the cube into my pocket. Back away. Slowly. They complied, beady black eyes locked on my gun. Now. How do I work this thing? I waved the alien weapon with zero confidence. A flurry of clicking and chittering I was tempted to blast as pure mockery, but that would do me no favors. The lead alien pointed to a series of small raised dots along the handle. I took a steadying breath, lined up the sights, and squeezed. The console exploded with a shower of sparks and the acrid stench of burnt electronics. The aliens jumped, screeching with renewed alarm. One word out of any of you, and your buddy here loses more than an arm, I lied through my teeth, hoping they couldn't spot the sheen of sweat on my upper lip. I backed away, weapon trained on them, until I reached the doorway. Then, without another word, I bolted. Every instinct shrieked at me to run, to put as much distance between myself and that control room as possible. But I wasn't an idiot. They knew. The whole damn ship probably knew by now that their lab rat had gone rogue. The element of surprise, my only advantage, was shot to hell. I needed to change the game. The labyrinthine corridors, once a source of fear, now felt like a twisted maze full of possibilities. I checked the alien data cube, swearing when the glyphs and diagrams swam in front of my eyes, illegible in my panic. It was a risk, a huge one, but I needed to find somewhere to hole up, gather my thoughts, and make a new plan. A flicker of movement caught my eye, a flash of insectal chrome disappearing around a corner. Damn it. The drones. My heart tried to leap into my throat. There was no way I could outrun them, outmaneuver them. Options slammed through my mind, each one more desperate than the last. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The drone was hovering just on the periphery of the corridor, its single crimson sensor sweeping back and forth like an angry, mechanized eye. It hadn't locked onto me yet, but that was only a matter of time. Maybe I'd gotten lucky. Maybe, in their arrogance, they wouldn't expect their escaped prisoner to double back, to actually run toward the areas where security would undoubtedly be tightest. Or maybe I was a complete moron. There was usually a thin line separating brilliance from sheer stupidity, and I was about to tap dance right across it. I ducked into an alcove, pressing myself against the cool metal wall. Footsteps echoed outside, growing louder with each passing second. Closer, closer. Then silence. Had I lost them? Nope. The drone whipped around the corner, its sensor swiveling frantically. It hovered for a moment, then darted ahead, pinging its sensor along another stretch of corridor. I waited until the soft buzzing faded, then slipped back out onto the main path, moving against the flow of likely pursuers. The hangar had to be through this sector. It just had to be. The data cube thrummed in my pocket, a beacon in the dark. I glanced down, and froze. One of the glyphs pulsed in rapid succession, translating on the tiny screen in a series of blocky letters I could actually comprehend. Warning. Intruder alert. I swore under my breath. My gamble hadn't paid off at all. The ship's AI, or whatever passed for its brains, knew exactly where I was. They'd be waiting, armed to the teeth and ready to blow me to smithereens the second I poked my head into their hangar. A sense of futility washed over me. Why was I even fighting this? I was one human against a damn spaceship full of spindly freak things with technology I could barely understand. My best option was probably to just curl up in a ball somewhere and wait for the inevitable. Then again, wait for the inevitable was what had gotten me into this mess in the first place. No. I wasn't giving up. These aliens didn't own me, didn't get to dictate my fate. Somewhere deep down, buried under the fear and adrenaline and sheer bone-deep exhaustion, a defiance began to simmer. They might be faster, stronger, smarter, but I knew something they didn't. I knew what desperation felt like. I knew what it was to have your back against the wall, your world reduced to a single, brutal choice, fight or die. Humans were experts at fighting or dying. The path ahead forked, and I instinctively took the less brightly lit option. I needed shadows, corners, places to hide. I wasn't sure how long I had until the full brunt of their security force realized I'd backtracked and changed directions. An acrid smell, like burning wires mixed with something rotten, reached my nose. A faint light flickered at the end of the corridor. Curiosity, the traitorous companion, nudged me forward. It turned out to be a maintenance shaft, the kind of narrow, grimy passageway you'd find in the belly of any old industrial building, even alien ones, it seemed. I peered in. Tight, almost claustrophobic, but big enough for a human to squeeze through. It was dark, almost pitch black once you got a few meters in. No handy overhead lights in here. This could work. I wormed my way into the shaft. The metal was greasy under my palms and smelled faintly of rust and something distinctly unidentifiable. Not ideal, but desperate times and all that. They probably had sensors, heat or motion activated, but this tight space might render those unreliable. The darkness, however, was an unexpected ally. If I stayed still, absolutely still, maybe they'd just scuttle right past me. Or I could end up nose to creepy crawly mandibles with a pissed off alien soldier. Either way, the next few minutes were going to be interesting. Every creak and groan of the ventilation shaft was amplified in the thick silence, making my skin crawl with the imagined sensation of 1,000 scuttling insect legs. The air, recycled and stale, hung heavy, leaving a metallic taste in my mouth. Panic threatened to choke me. Being trapped was my worst nightmare, and the darkness clung like a second skin. But the image of dissected lab rat flashed through my mind, and a cold determination hardened my resolve. I wasn't dying in this metal tomb. A scuttling noise echoed from somewhere outside the vent. My heart pounded so hard I was sure they could hear it. Were they onto my trail, or was that my own paranoia finally spiraling out of control? I inched forward, wincing at the sharp scrape of my shoulder blade against the metal. My muscles burned with the effort of pulling myself along, a grim reminder of just how long my body had been a well-pampered specimen instead of a survival machine. The ship thrummed faintly beneath me, a constant vibration I could feel in my bones. The data cube pulsed in my pocket. Another warning flash? I fished it out with trembling fingers. The display flickered, but instead of the stark warning signs I expected, the screen filled with a twisting maze of lines, the ship's schematics. Hope flared, then promptly fizzled. I was no engineer, no genius capable of deciphering alien tech on the fly. Still, the simple fact that the cube was responding meant something. Right? Something brushed against my ankle. I yelped, scrambling back so fast I cracked my skull on the roof of the shaft. My vision flashed white with pain, and for a sickening moment, I thought I was about to black out. But whatever had touched me was gone, vanished back into the darkness. Rat? Some kind of insect thing? I sucked in ragged breaths, fighting the waves of nausea. Whatever it was a brutal reminder that even if I managed to outsmart the aliens, I wasn't alone down here. Time lost all meaning. I crawled with agonizing slowness, the data cube clutched to my chest like a talisman. The map on the screen was useless without some point of reference, but the cube itself thrummed gently with stored energy. If I could find a junction box, a place where the ship's power systems converged. Maybe I could use it to get their attention, or even disrupt their systems. It was a desperate gamble, but better than passively waiting in the dark. A faint flicker ahead broke the crushing monotony. Finally, an exit. My hands, slick with sweat and grime, trembled as I pried the grate loose. One last, painful contortion, and I tumbled out of the vent. Straight into a pair of bulbous, multifaceted eyes. A shriek tore from my throat. The alien recoiled with a startled hiss, and I scrambled backward, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. Tall and spindly, this one wasn't dressed in the tunic-like garments of the others. Its translucent skin was covered in a segmented exoskeleton, like some kind of grotesque insectoid knight. A soldier. It snapped its chitinous mandibles, a threatening sound that cut through the low hum of the dimly lit junction room. This wasn't a lab tech or a curious scientist. This was built for one thing only. I snatched the alien gun from the holster. It hummed eagerly in my grip. I'd never been a great shot back on Earth, but desperation tends to sharpen one's focus. I fired a warning blast, more to buy myself precious seconds than to actually take the thing down. Energy sizzled across the walls, scorching the metal plating. The alien screeched again, recoiling as acrid smoke filled the air. Then it lunged. I rolled, dodging its grasping claws. The junction box was just a few feet away, a shimmering mass of wires and blinking lights that could either be my salvation or my doom. The alien recovered fast, scuttling forward on too many legs. I fired again. The blast caught it square in the shoulder. Chitin cracked, and it let out a howl that set my teeth on edge. It was down, but not out. In the close confines of the room, there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. With a growl of desperation, I slammed the data cube into the junction box. Sparks showered down as an ear-splitting shriek filled the room, not from the alien, but from the ship itself. Lights flickered wildly, and the thrum of the engines sputtered and died. My ears rang, and for a panicked heartbeat, I was plunged into absolute darkness. Then emergency systems kicked in. Harsh red bathed the room, and somewhere in the distance, alarms blared. I'd done it. I'd gotten their attention. And now the whole damn ship would be descending on this spot. The alien, disoriented but still very much alive, pulled itself upright with a groan. It stalked toward me, pincer-like claws flexing. My gun was useless, the power source drained by my reckless stunt. This was it. The end of the line. Suddenly, the alien froze. Its head snapped to the side, then twitched again as if listening to some inaudible sound. A tremor ran through its spindly limbs, and it collapsed in a quivering heap. I blinked, disbelieving. Dead? Just like that? Before I could process it, a second figure hurtled into the room, moving with a blinding speed that defied the alien's usual clumsy scuttle. One blow, lightning fast and precise, and there was only a wet cracking sound and a spray of glistening ichor. My heart stuttered to a standstill. The figure lowered its hand, or was it a claw? Dash and whirled around to face me with eerie silence. Even in the dim red light, there was no mistaking the creature before me. Bug-eyed, spindly limbs, the same sickeningly segmented exoskeleton, an alien. But it was smaller, somehow sleeker, and as it stalked closer, I saw a controlled power to its movements that sent a shiver down my spine. It chittered, the sound barely a whisper. Then it reached up and unlatched its segmented helmet, revealing a face that wasn't all that different from the others. Except for the eyes. Instead of the blank, inky blackness, these were a vivid, startling blue. It blinked, as if surprised to find me staring. Then, in heavily accented but understandable English, it said, "Come with me if you want to live."